All right, describing the characteristics of the function. So when we look at this function, this should be, it's a typo, x equals a negative 1/2 x plus 2 squared minus 3. So the first thing I'm going to identify is my vertex. So looking at this function, my vertex would be, is our p-q value. And because this is an x plus 2, my p value is actually a negative 2, and my q value would be negative 3. Okay, so let's just give ourselves a quick sketch of what this looks like. So I know my vertex is at negative 2 and negative 3. I also know from this graph that my a value is negative and this graph is going to open down. So this would be a sketch of my graph. So fairly straightforward. I'm now going to talk about the axis of symmetry. So remember, the axis of symmetry is this imaginary line that cuts this parabola in half. And so this imaginary line is going through my x value at negative 2. So the equation would be x equals negative 2. I'm now going to talk about my max or minimum. This would be a maximum. So looking at this parabola, this vertex occurs at a maximum point on my graph. So it'd be a maximum point at y equals negative 3. So the highest y value on this graph would be a negative 3. Let's talk about the direction. Okay, so this graph opens down, fairly straightforward. The domain and range, well, the domain of this function, technically horizontally, this graph is going to go forever to the left and forever to the right. So this would be all real numbers. Our range would be everything smaller than negative 3 in terms of the y value. So our highest point is negative 3 and our y values are getting smaller. So this would be y is less than or equal to a negative 3, where y belongs to the reals. Okay, and then the trickiest part always is the x and y intercepts. So let's start with x-intercepts, because that's actually fairly straightforward here, because when we look at this, our sketch, does this graph even cross the x-axis? No, it doesn't. So our x-intercepts, there are none. So we're just going to put none there. And then we're going to talk about the y-intercept. Well, our y-intercept occurs when it crosses the y-axis. And what do we know about this point? Well, we know this point would have an x value of 0, and then we'd need to figure out the y value at that point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 0 and substitute it into this function for x, and then evaluate this to get my y value. So y is equal to negative 1/2, 0 plus 2 squared minus 3. Well, 0 plus 2 is 2. 2 squared is going to give me 4. 4 times a negative 1/2 would be a negative 2. Minus 3, my y value is a negative 5. So my y-intercept occurs at 0, negative 5. Okay, and those are all the characteristics of a quadratic function.